Thank you, Margaritis, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you also for your patience, which is a critical virtue for any negotiation.
Would be for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, David and I and our teams just finished a few minutes ago the second round of negotiations. In our first round in June, we agreed on the organization of the negotiations. Our second round, which began on Monday, was about the presentation of our respective positions. Our objective was to start working on substance and also continue building trust between us. I said last week that I wanted to identify the points where we agree and the points where we disagree. This was possible this week for the issues on which there was a clear British position. Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, on substance. First of all, the issue of citizens' rights. This is a priority shared by the European Union, the 27 member states, the European Parliament, and of course the United Kingdom. The detailed British position has made it possible for us to start identifying, as I said, points of convergence and of divergence. And we are now all moving forward in a common direction. There does remain one fundamental divergence on the way in which such rights would be guaranteed, and on several other points, for example, the rights of future family members, or the export of certain social benefits. In the withdrawal agreement itself, citizens must be able to find the legal certainty which they need for their day-to-day lives. Quite frankly, as far as we are concerned, we can see no other way in which we can guarantee the permanent continuation of such European rights as exercised. And clearly, any reference to European rights imply their oversight by the Court of Justice of the European Union. Therefore, at the next negotiating session, we must clarify the reasons for those divergences while constantly remembering our common objective that those citizens may continue to live as they do today. Now on the financial settlement. Last week, the United Kingdom recognized the existence of obligations vis-à-vis the Union beyond the date of withdrawal and the need to settle those obligations, as the European Union itself had also already recognized. And clearly, only with that recognition is it possible to start as quickly as possible work on identifying exactly which obligations must be settled. The EU position was made public on May the 29th. It is the result of a review of all of the commitments which, from our point of view, must be covered by the withdrawal agreement. And this week, together, we have provided a detailed legal analysis of these commitments. As I said very clearly to David, a clarification of the UK position is indispensable for us to negotiate and for us to make sufficient progress on this financial dossier, which is inseparable from the other withdrawal dossiers. What we want, and we're working on this, is an orderly withdrawal for the United Kingdom as decided. And an orderly withdrawal means that accounts must be settled. We know that that agreement will not be achieved through incremental steps. As soon as the United Kingdom is ready to clarify the nature of its commitments, we will be prepared to discuss this with the British negotiators.
On Ireland, we had a first discussion on the impact of Brexit on two key subjects, the Good Friday Agreement and the Common Travel Area. We agree that the important issue of the Good Friday Agreement between Ireland and the UK in all its dimensions require more detailed discussions. In particular, more work needs to be done to protect North-South cooperation between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Today, that cooperation is embedded in the common framework of the EU law and EU policies. We need to better understand how the UK intends of ensuring the continuation of this cooperation after Brexit. We also agreed that the UK should clarify in the next session how it intends on maintaining the common travel area after leaving the EU. Enfin,
finally, on the other separation issues, we had an exchange of views on the scope, on the means of providing legal clarity where Brexit creates uncertainties, for example, for goods on the market, but also for police cooperation, for citizens or companies involved in pending legal procedures. And we have explained our positions on the basis of the 7 position papers which we published and on which we have been able to work. We have taken note of positions and clarifications from the United Kingdom on certain points and on their intention to clarify their positions in upcoming negotiating rounds. So, as I say, by way of conclusion, the first round was about organisation. This week has been about presentation. The third round must be about clarification. And we require this clarification on the financial settlement, on citizens' rights, on Ireland, with the 2 key points of the Common Travel Area and the Good Friday Agreement, and on the other separation issues, where this week's experience has quite simply shown that we make better progress where our respective positions are clear. So, David, over to you.
Thank you, Michel. Thank you for your contribution and indeed your team's constructive talks this week. On Monday, we agreed to get down to the need to get down to serious business. But before turning to the substance, I want to reiterate the 4
We're going to say goodbye to viewers on BBC Two, but here on the BBC News channel continue to watch discussions from Brussels.
Constructively as a full and responsible member state. Second, we continue to work hard and at pace. We had 98 civil servants here this week. Third, we negotiate for every nation and region of the United Kingdom. Our goal is to secure a deal that works for all parts of the country. And finally, we will keep Parliament and the public informed as negotiations unfold. Which moves me on to the substance. Overall, I am encouraged by the progress we have made on understanding each other's positions on citizens' rights, the financial settlement, the first meetings of subgroups on separation issues, and on the issues around Ireland and Northern Ireland. Since the first round of negotiations, the UK has published its approach to citizens' rights. The talks this week have demonstrated this both a fair and serious offer. I am pleased by the progress we have made. We've looked at each other's proposals in depth and identified many concrete areas where we agree, as well as areas where there will be further discussion and which will be a priority for the next round, as Michel said. We've also agreed to publishing a joint paper today that sets out the many areas of convergence in our proposals and the areas we need to prioritise for future discussion in our future rounds. Michel listed a number of the areas which require that future discussion, and I won't reiterate them. I'll add to them issues like voters' rights, postal workers, and of course, as he said, the need for shared certainty. We agree on the need for certainty on the part of citizens both of the EU and the UK, we obviously have different views on how we achieve that. On financial settlement, we both recognise the importance of sorting out the obligations we have to one another, both legally and in a spirit of mutual cooperation. We've had robust but constructive talks this week. Clearly there's a lot left to talk about and further work before we can resolve this. Ultimately, getting to a solution will require flexibility from both sides. But as Michel said, we shouldn't expect incremental progress in every round. On Ireland and Northern Ireland, our coordinators, because this is a discussion rather than a working group, our coordinators have had a good discussion. Both sides remain committed to the Good Friday Agreement, again as Michel said, and achieving a flexible and imaginative solutions to address unique circumstances around the border, and particularly on the north-south dimension of the agreement. And these include the mechanisms that we have discussed to preserve the common travel area and the rights associated with it. Rights laid down, of course, in a British Act of Parliament, as well as in part, at least in the Amsterdam Treaty. On separation issues, we've made progress on a range of issues. Michel mentioned most of them. Euratom, legal cases pending before the European Court of Justice, and administrative procedures before the Union institutions, and, of course, goods on the market. These discussions have laid important groundwork for progress in the next round. All in all, the second round of negotiations has given us a lot to be positive about. And they've also highlighted the need for both sides to demonstrate a dynamic and flexible approach in the way we approach these challenges. We've conducted this round constructively and at pace, and I hope this is a model we can continue going forward. To coin a phrase, Michel, the clock is ticking.
That's true.
I came here saying it was important that we now made progress, identifying the differences so that we could deal with them, and finding the similarities so that we could reinforce them. And this week, I think we've done just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Let's start. Yes, please.
From Sky News. Mr. Davis, Mr. Barnier just reflected that you have said that Britain recognises its obligations, but on the financial settlement, can you give us at least some clarity, because people are confused? Does this mean categorically that Britain accepts that there will be a net flow of money to the European Union? And Mr. Barnier, if I can ask you, on the European Court of Justice, will that be a red line on any determination of substantive progress on EU citizens' rights?
Can I answer first, Michel? The first thing to say is I'm not going to enter into the negotiation in the press conference. What I will say is last week we published again in a written statement to the British Parliament to remind people of what we'd said in the Lancaster House speech and in the White Papers and the Article 50 letter, that we're a country that recognises its international responsibilities and rights, and that we will seek to exercise both in the future. I don't recognise the phrase net flow, but we will seek to exercise both in the future. Michel.
Pourquoi nous insistons?
Let me explain why we insist and stress the role of the ECJ. This is not a political point we're making. It's a legal one. Simply, if there is to be continuity of EU law, that has to be framed by case law of the court. And only the court can interpret EU law. It's not a choice, it's an obligation. EU law has to go on applying. I suppose your question is why? Well, because we want our citizens to be able to continue to be protected by that law, by the EU law, for which reason fundamental importance is placed upon the role of the ECJ.
Then ahead, Katja, the right.
Mr. Barnier, if I could ask you first of all, please, Katja Adler from the BBC. In a good negotiation, it takes give and take from both sides. The United Kingdom has conceded to the EU plan timetable for Brexit negotiations. It's also accepted that it has financial obligations to honour when it leaves. where will the EU be showing some give, perhaps as a trust-making exercise? Isn't there any wiggle room, for example, over the ECJ? And if I could ask you as State Secretary as well, over and again we've heard Mr. Barnier today saying he needs more clarification from the United Kingdom over its positions on a number of issues. In order to work out and to give that clarification, do you, State Secretary, not need to be here in Brussels during negotiating rounds for more than a few hours at the beginning and at the end of the week? Thank you.
Collègue de la BBC.
A BBC colleague of yours asked me something pretty similar last time round, or a few days ago anyway. Are you prepared to make concessions? Where are you able to make concessions? Well, we're not in a sort of game of making concessions or asking for concessions. Negotiations are only just starting. You said that the UK has agreed to organising the agenda in the way it has been. Well, I mean, hang on. The UK decided to leave the EU. That's a serious decision, a serious matter with serious and grave consequences. We take it seriously. I'm sure David and his team also take it very seriously. And we agreed on how to organise this. It wasn't a concession we were asking from them. We asked for the most sensible arrangement we could agree on, to have week-long sequences of negotiations for our teams, which have to be prepared in advance through paper and other means. I have to consult internally with the College of Commissioners, 28 commissioners, President Juncker, and also the 27 member states in Council, President Tusk, not to mention Parliament. And after every session, I have to go before the Parliament steering groups. This is all a lot of work, plus all the visits I carry out in member states. So it was reasonable to agree on how to take this forward. It wasn't a concession we were asking for. Now, I've often done negotiations before. I was saying with David Davis, we both negotiated a wee while ago when it was in the run-up to the Amsterdam Treaty 20 years ago. Oh, we know each other quite well, actually, which can help. I know one has to compromise in negotiation, but we're not there yet. When I say, and I think I was very clear and transparent about that, that there are things that are inseparable from others. That's the financial settlement, let's be very clear. We want clarity on that because we need to be able to work more and forward until we come to putative areas of compromise. We can't do anything without a global picture as to, for instance, what the United Kingdom are prepared to accept as being their obligation that would be covered by the withdrawal agreement. And then we can work towards compromises. But at the moment, we're still clarifying.
Right, your question to me. I was rather amused by the coverage earlier this week. The way these things work is we had 4 main groups and a number of subgroups, 98 officials here working through the week, reporting to me on a regular basis throughout the course of the week. I, of course, came and opened it at the request of the Commission, with the agreement of the Commission, and came back today, last night in fact, to go through all the details of what we have discussed and where the resolution issues are. And I do that at the same time as doing my duties to Parliament, to Cabinet, and of course organising the preparation of the United Kingdom to leave the EU in 2 years' time.
Yes, please go ahead.
Peter Foster from the London Daily Telegraph. First question to Mr. Barnier. Mr. Barnier, you said that EU law must apply to European citizens in the UK when those citizens will be resident in a third country. Can you tell me of a single other country that accepts the jurisdiction of another court over their citizens? And to Mr. Davis, Mr. Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, said that the EU could go and whistle for its money earlier this week. When are you going to level with the British public that we are going to have to make significant financial payments to the EU as part of this Brexit process?
First of all, can I remind us all that we are in a process of negotiations which are quite extraordinary in their nature. I don't think we've ever, in the history of the EU, going back from the very beginnings of European construction in the 1950s and the Treaty of Rome, followed by many countries joining, one of whom in 72, 73 being the UK. And back then, by the way, can I point out that I was very much in favor of that. I was in favor in French politics in the 72, when we had a referendum in France. I was one of those who was urging a yes vote to the UK joining, which makes it rather ironic to be where I am now. But anyway, never in that history of the EU have we ever had to discuss legal certainty for 4 million or however many citizens, 1.2 million UK citizens at least, that live, work or are retired, who chose to live in one of the 27 EU member states, plus on the other side the 3 million odd of the 27 who live and contribute to the UK economy and live in the UK. We've never had such a situation before. And we owe them this security, this protection. As to the very important point of respect for European law, as I said to your colleague before, for us, it is court case law that must continue to rule and the court that must continue to oversee the process on this. Thank you. Oh, sorry, but there's one other point I wanted to make. This is, as I said, unique, extraordinary, because the nature of this decision to withdraw that the UK took and its consequences on citizens, on people, on women and children. And when you think about what it means for the UK from the economic area and fellow members of the EEA, such as Norway, well, of course, there's specific arrangements. And if you take the EEA, they have an arrangement that dovetails in with the ECJ, but I'd point that out to you as an example of what you were talking about.
Right, for me. I think, I wasn't actually in the chamber for the Foreign Secretary's comment, but I think he said they could whistle for extortionate demands. That was the phrase he used. As for levelling, well, the Prime Minister has been very plain about this from the beginning, from her Lancaster speech onwards. She said we will meet our international obligations and expect to be respected for our international rights. She said that Parliament will make decisions after we leave, and after we leave we'll come to the end of the UK paying enormous sums to the European Union. All of those are still true.
Thank you. Yes, Catherine.
Catherine Fior, EU reporter. Michel Barnier, on Northern Ireland, you've repeatedly said that the Good Friday Agreement must be respected in all its dimensions. And one of those dimensions is rigorous impartiality. Do you think that the UK can be described as impartial following their supply and confidence agreement with the Democratic Unionist Party? And is this something that you raised with the Minister? And a question for the Minister. This morning, Liam Fox, Minister for International Trade, said that the UK could survive without a deal. The ex-Chancellor of the Exchequer has said to leave without a deal would be a very, very bad outcome. Do you lean more towards the Minister for International Trade or towards the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Thank you.
Well, in a press conference here, as part of the negotiating process, I am certainly not going to make a comment on the political situation in the United Kingdom. It's not my role, although it is obviously a subject that interests me, but I will certainly not comment on that situation. What I do know is that we have common responsibility. At our first meeting before you, David Davis quoted Churchill, And I quoted Jean Monnet. And other high-level British politicians have been inspired by Churchill. I remember a few months back when speaking to the Committee of the Regions, he said the price of greatness is responsibility. And that applies to both sides. I'm not trying to give anyone a lesson, but that is a very important principle. We are responsible for our financial commitments, responsible for our share in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, for re-establishing the dialogue of peace and stability. That applies to the Good Friday Agreement, in which the European Union has played an important part. It was one to which I gave my support when I was Commissioner for Regional Matters through the Peace Programme. It also applies to the Common Travel Area. And the United Kingdom is jointly responsible, joint guarantor. Whatever discussions or domestic political arrangements are, and we also, I repeat, have our share of responsibility, as I said before, for North-South cooperation and the links in very concrete public policy areas. There is this clear link with European policies and with the single market. So, in the political dialogue between Ollie Robbins and Sabine Weiland, we are committing to this on both of our behalves with the utmost responsibility. So this reference to responsibility, as per Winston Churchill, is of vital importance for the negotiations to succeed.
Firstly, before the question you put to me, can I add my comment to Michel's comment that the British government continues to take incredibly seriously its requirement for impartiality, irrespective of any deal of any sort. On the question of, I didn't hear Dr. Fox this morning, but if he says what you said, actually he's not saying anything different from what the Chancellor said. In that interview, when he referred to very bad, he said, but if there was a punishment deal, we'd have to do it, and we would make it work. But of course, nobody expects a punishment deal. Michel and I are both going for a good deal.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you all for your presence. Thank you.